Greetings and welcome to the Shout Factory DVD special edition of The Velvet Vampire. My name is Nathaniel Thompson, and I am sitting here today with the beautiful and talented star of the film, Miss Celeste Yarnall, the Velvet Vampire herself, who's going to be talking a little bit about her memories of this classic Roger Corman film. So, Celeste, how did you first become involved with this film? Do you remember?
I remember that I came in to meet Roger Corman and Stephanie Rothman and her husband, and we had a really lovely meeting. They were interested in me for the part, and the offer was made, and I accepted, and I'm very happy that I did.
Now, did you read the script when you first offered the part? Did you have any thoughts on how you envisioned this character being? Was it something that you had in your head when you were reading it?
I especially liked the script because, well, first of all, I was very excited that a woman was directing, and as you know, at that time, that was something quite unusual, and I really enjoyed Charles and Stephanie very much, and I felt that the twist on the vampire lore was quite interesting. They didn't follow the genre typically. They had created quite a nice storyline for me where I was suffering from this rare blood disease and needed blood to sustain myself, which was part of my anti-aging protocol in the movie. And obviously it kept me going for about 100 years, I think. So I was fascinated by that, and because of Stephanie, and of course because of Roger, I agreed to do it, and here we are.
Now, what's interesting is Roger was probably the first American producer who was very supportive of female directors. He nurtured a lot of female filmmakers like Stephanie and Penelope Spheris and Barbara Peters and people like that. Do you remember his interaction? Did he treat his female directors any differently, or what was his attitude?
I thought Roger, from the moment I met him, was the perfect gentleman, and absolutely a dream to know as a human being, and a joy to work with. And I cherish the memories of working with Roger and Stephanie.
And just a quick note for horror fans out there, I'm sure some of you may have figured this out, but this was one of a few vampire films in the early 70s when sort of the lesbian vampire idea first became very popular. And where that all started was a novella that was actually written many, many, many decades before called Carmilla by a writer named J. Sheridan Le Fanu. And there's a little nod in the film in the fact that your character is actually named Diane Le Fanu. So it's a little literary nod there.
And I did not know that until just now. You might also notice that my wardrobe is really, really beautiful. I had a fantastic costume designer who did design almost every garment that I wore specifically for me.
Yeah, it's very striking. Did you have any input into your costumes? Because it's interesting how when you go from the city to the desert, how everyone's look sort of changes a little bit, and it's very striking, the whole design of the film.
My costumes, there were a few outfits that I wore in the desert. Did we cut out for a minute?
Okay.
Okay. There were a few costumes that I wore in the desert that were like my own personal jeans and sweaters and things like that. But for the most part, Keith designed everything for me, and I only wish I could have kept some of them. I don't weigh too much differently than I did then, so they're all still very much in style.
Now, did you already know how to drive a dune buggy when you were hired, or did you have to practice that?
I was given dune buggy driving lessons. I've driven some stunt driving in quite a few different venues, TV commercials. I've always been a very, very good driver. My dad was an automotive engineer and kind of taught me how to drive like a race car driver. So anytime I got a chance to drive in a film, I was quite pleased about it. And I must say that I really did enjoy driving the dune buggy.
Now, since this film came out, a lot of people who have written about it have viewed it as sort of one of the earliest feminist horror films. Is that something that you agree with? Was that something people actually thought about when they were making it? Or was that just sort of like a happy subtext that's sort of become associated with the movie?
It felt very progressive when I made the film. And, it was a well-written, well-crafted screenplay. If it's not on the page, it'll never be on screen. And it just felt very timely, and the cast and crew were wonderful to work with. And this art gallery sequence is quite beautiful. It's beautifully lit. Even the art is interesting, and you know how interested I am in art these days.
The whole film has a very sort of artistic feel to it. It's almost like if Georgia O'Keeffe made a horror film, it might kind of look like this, you know.
Interesting. That's a very interesting thought. I'm a fan of Georgia O'Keeffe. And we were also very pleased to have the cinematographer that we had, who, from what I recall, had worked on the camera crew for A Man and a Woman, the Lelouch classic.
Well, it's interesting the way the film is shot. So much of it takes place in broad daylight, which of course you would never expect for a vampire film, you know, which I think that's why a lot of people remember it, you know, especially the dream sequences and the chase scenes and all that. They're, you know, in broad daylight, which is, it's so not what you would think of an early 70s horror film to have.
Exactly, and also not easy to shoot in direct sunlight either, you know.
Yeah. Did you have any problems with, like, did anybody get, you know, borderline heat stroke or anything during the shoot?
A lot of what we did was indoors, but when we were, and it was the wintertime, as I recall, so the weather was really quite beautiful. I was struck a couple of times by the sunsets. I'll never forget driving down a desert highway in my trailer dressing room, and my driver was driving, and I'm up front in the passenger seat, and this huge full moon, that was the biggest full moon I've ever seen in my life, is staring me in the face, and behind me the huge globe of the sun is setting. And it's just an exquisite memory.
Oh, that's not me.
Now, of course, here you're meeting your male co-star Michael Blodgett, who is now, of course, very fondly remembered for Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, which is, you know, one of the biggest cult films out there now. What do you remember about him? When did you first meet, and what was your rapport like with him working on the film?
I actually had met Michael for the first time on the filming of The Velvet Vampire, and I remembered him from, didn't he have something to do with kind of a musical variety show? Wasn't there something else that he was quite famous for?
Yeah, he's also a musician and a dancer. And, yeah.
Right. It was like Boogaloo or, you know, some really fun show. Very handsome, very talented, and fun to work with.
Guess what, honey?
And of course, there's Sherry Miles, who's had probably the most limited career out of the three of you. Do you remember anything about working with her?
I remember perfectly well that Sherry had her drama coach with her on the set, and she was almost constantly in between takes working with the drama coach.
Mm-hmm.
How's the water?
And she had a lovely tan.
Now, of course, Roger is famous for you know, doing his films very, very quickly. Do you remember how fast this was shot? Did it feel like a rush production, or did you have time to really focus on it?
I never felt that the production felt rushed. I felt that we were given time, but it felt more like television than a huge MGM, you know, type feature film. So it had a more television setup feeling to it, which I was quite used to, having done so many guest starring roles, and so I was comfortable with the pace. I like to move through a story, and you know, nothing's worse for an actor than sitting around all day and waiting for your next shot.
Now, what point were you in your career? You were sort of transitioning from a lot of television work to feature films. What were your feelings about your career at the time you made this?
I was just going to tell you that this scene right here with the car was almost the road where I saw that enormous moon in front of me and the sun behind me. For me personally, this was an interesting time in my life because my daughter was just born, my only daughter, Cammie, was born about 8 months prior to this, and my big memory is when I went on the audition, I was still breastfeeding my daughter, and much to my chagrin, I had to discontinue that and immediately try to quickly drop, 5-10 pounds of water weight, being a nice mommy, and get ready to go on location. And there are even some memories of where the nanny brought me my baby to the set. But so that was just it was a huge, hugely interesting time for me because, I'd been pregnant for 9 months and actually did a film at the beginning of my pregnancy. I was like 3 months pregnant when I did The Beast of Blood, and I continued to work through my pregnancy doing television commercials all the way through the 9th month. And and right after she was born, I went to New York on a TV commercial when she was just a couple of weeks old and took her with me. So we... It was a little tough being separated from my very young baby at this point, but, got to pay the mortgage.
Absolutely.
And how often do you get to play a vampire in your life?
Now, this is actually your second horror film, of course, after Beast of Blood. You sort of jumped around from genre to genre. You've done musicals, you've done science fiction, you've done horror. Was there a particular type of genre that you preferred, or were you just sort of gung-ho to do anything?
Absolutely gung-ho to do anything as an actress because you can really stretch and spread your wings when you're given the opportunity to do something that you might even feel is very far away from you as a person. So, what does an actor do? It's just putting themselves in the situation. So the degree of belief you have of yourself in the situation helps the performance be solid. So I was convincing myself that I was this person with this rare blood disease and, found a logical way to conduct myself and live my life on screen.
Now, it's interesting, even in your small parts, it seems like you almost never play a role that could be called sort of a victim or a sidekick. Was that something you deliberately looked for? Was a part that was stronger than you would expect, especially like this and Star Trek, are very, very strong roles, especially for the time?
I think I was just lucky. No, don't. And the tides or the times, they were a-changin', as Bob Dylan said. So I think I was really just, I think it was a lucky break. I think any actor is pretty darn happy when they're offered work. And that would include me.
Now, there's quite a bit of humor in the script. Some of the dialogue is very sort of witty and sort of cheeky. Is that something that you picked up on when you read it, or were you encouraged to sort of exaggerate that by Stephanie?
I honestly didn't really pick up on it because I was so, into my character and trying to be serious. So, I don't even want to say trying to be serious. I was being serious. So, I had to avoid what might have been construed later on as humorous, because you can't play comedy, you can't play drama. You just have to be. You have an action, and an action being what you're in the scene to accomplish, and that's what you focus on. Who am I? What am I doing here? And what am I trying to say? Trying, basically pushing the story forward.
Well, how can you tell if you haven't tried?
Lee, I have tried.
So let's talk about eating raw meat, shall we? What do you remember about shooting this scene?
This scene, we really weren't eating raw meat in this scene, and you do know the scene where I was really eating raw meat. So that, I don't drink, so that certainly wasn't real wine. That was grape juice. So I think there was probably something nondescript on our plates that we moved around with our forks. I don't recall if they actually had a shot of the steak tartare. Now, this actor I had worked with on Star Trek.
Have you ever driven a dune buggy?
No, but I'd like to try.
No two are alike. Take mine.
So now, how did everyone feel about sort of the, by today's standards, it's of course very mild, but, the film definitely has sort of a heavy erotic feel to it, and there's a fair amount of nudity, although surprisingly Michael, I think, gets most of it. Was there any talk about that beforehand, like how the sexuality would be handled in the film, or was it just something you said, I just trust the director and just do what she says?
you
Well,
feel like
until
it's
Beast of Blood, I had turned down, I can't tell you how many movies because of nudity, and I had set my mind that that was just something that I was not going to do. But I was in a position financially where I couldn't afford to say no any longer. What I've tried to do is
What are you doing, Ralph?
have the nudity, but there was a good reason for it within the context of the scene. It really didn't feel exploitive per se. It was part of the story. And so, with that in mind, and the incredible sensitivity of Stephanie Rothman, who would close the set down to one camera operator, herself and Charles, and maybe one lighting technician. And she was just enormously sensitive to my feelings. And for that, I was very, very grateful. She's a total professional and really a wonderful director. With a great style. You can see she had a beautiful style. With the help of the lighting and the cinematography and the mood music, it's quite beautifully shot, I think. And of course, getting to see it all these years later here with you is great fun.
I think this might actually be the quintessential California horror film. It just captures that atmosphere so perfectly,
Well, the California art world today is perhaps one of the biggest art scenes in the entire world, even though London and Paris and New York may not want to admit that. But the real action, art-wise, is here in California. And there's a specific feeling to art that is created here. Mm-hmm. And it's been an art capital from the beginning of the movie industry. So it's really no wonder that, it should be the quintessential California horror movie. You might even notice that this particular costume was designed for that little peekaboo hand move. Mm-hmm. And you don't find touches like that on most lower budget films.
Right.
So
Maybe you'll like it.
It was a low budget film, certainly. By today's standards, it virtually had no budget.
Right.
But there's an awful lot that you're getting on screen, a lot of value.
Did you ever hear how Roger felt about the film? Was he happy with it when it was first completed, or did it go through any changes at all?
Come to think of it, I don't remember. I think he was pleased with it. Because I never heard anything to the contrary, so I assume that he was pleased with it.
What was that?
Probably just a coyote.
It sounded almost human.
Sometimes they do.
Lee, I'm scared.
So now, when the film came out, did you ever go see it with an audience, or were you there for the premiere? Did you get to see how people reacted to it?
Believe it or not, I saw this film in a drive-in with my little baby and my mother, and I thought my mother would disown me.
What did she say after it was done?
How could you?
You, my own little girl.
Well, when were you aware that the film was getting something of a following? Because at the time, Roger was, No World was cranking movies out so fast that it was probably a little hard to tell, with the high volume. But it's still endured all these years, and it gets mentioned. What was that like when you first realized it?
I actually first realized it when I got involved with the autograph convention scene, which I was brought into because of the film I did with Elvis and the guest lead that I did on Star Trek. And then I started to find that there was a cult following for the Velvet Vampire, and it was just wonderful news for me. And of course, we've all been waiting for it to officially come out on DVD for a very long time. It was great when it came out on the Laserdisc, and I actually purchased one and the laser player to go with it, and it quickly went obsolete. But I think in light of today's huge response to the vampire movement right now, that I think it'll find a little niche and maybe get legs, and who knows? Maybe I'll get to play a vampire again.
Right. We should cast you on True Blood.
Definitely, definitely. you just go ahead and negotiate that. You can have the commission, okay?
Okay.
Well, I understand that Quentin Tarantino is a big fan of this film and actually owns one of the rare 35mm prints. So Quentin can make me an offer anytime to have a role in one of his films.
Well, it's easy to see why he would like it. I mean, it's definitely got that perfect balance of sort of art and exploitation, you know, where they just merge perfectly, you know.
And as I see the film, I see so much humor in it, even though I chose, as I mentioned to you, I chose to ignore that when I was making it. The last thing I wanted to do was crack up while I'm biting someone's neck.
Now, the dream sequence that keeps recurring through the film is, I think, probably one of the most striking visual set pieces in it. You know, it's so simple. It's just you're in the desert with a mirror and a bed. But it's just brilliant the way that it's carried off. Do you remember how they shot this, but how the effects were achieved in camera when they did this?
Well, one thing is for sure, I'm wearing an absolutely beautiful red dress, and red is my favorite color these days. And it was, again, Keith designed it, and it was chiffon, and, you know, we really had a bed in the desert. We really had that mirror. And, you know, we did it once, but like you say, it was recut through the film. And, you know, it was as if it was on a normal soundstage, except we were in the desert in blazing heat, of course, covered in sunscreen. But I'd love to have that dress today.
So yeah, this shot is a perfect example of just how painterly the film is in certain shots. I mean, you really could just freeze this and hang it on a wall. It's amazing.
Well, now that you mention it, you're absolutely right. I'm, you know, if I weren't here talking about myself, I would really find it visually beautiful. Especially the slow motion.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I became a brunette for this film. Most of my work was done as a blonde, so... And again, I think the nudity is handled tastefully.
Mm-hmm.
No.
She doesn't think so.
Well, she wasn't happy about a lot, was she?
Now, do you remember how Michael and Sherry got along in the film? Did they have any kind of friendship at all, or do you remember?
In the middle of the desert.
You know, each one of us had our own separate lives that we were trying to lead. So we would come together for our scenes and, you know, perhaps some lunches or dinners. But everyone would be staying focused on their character and taking care of their personal lives and their career business.
Who is it?
Good morning. It's almost dawn. And if you want to see the desert, we have to get started early before the sun becomes too strong. And be sure to cover yourselves up.
Here we get to see your dune buggy skills in play.
I don't want to see the desert.
I've been through the desert on a horse with no name, on a dune buggy with no name.
Now, was the dune buggy actually in the script, or was that something that Stephanie added during filming? Do you remember?
I think it was in the script. Somewhere I actually still have the copy of the script.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I've saved all my scripts.
This is the desert.
Was the script as short as the film turned out to be? Do you remember if there were any scenes that were dropped out that were shot for the film?
You know, until you mentioned it to me, I really had not thought that the film was short or that the script was short. But again, that would be a function of the budget.
Mm-hmm.
But,
I mean, that's sort of Roger Corman's law that all of his films had to be under 90 minutes. But I was just wondering if the script was always that. I mean, it's a very, very tight story. So.
Yeah. And the soundtrack is kind of cool.
Oh, yeah. The music's really great. I was just lamenting earlier there was never an LP released for it.
Well, are we going to release the CD?
They should. It would be great. If Roger owns the music, they should absolutely release the soundtrack because the music is so much fun.
Okay, I want to be on the cover of the CD.
And of course, coming up, we have the memorable scene involving Sherry and a snake. Do you have any memories of how you shot that scene?
You know, my memory is incredible, so I definitely have memories of this scene. This was certainly a first in my career where I would be lancing a snake bite and sucking the venom out, spitting on camera.
Dying. Being killed.
Do you have to drink a lot of water before the spitting just to make sure you're in character?
Keep me hydrated, yes. Being out in that heat, definitely. And being so fair, I was really lucky that I got to wear a hat because, you know, we were picking up reflection sunburns, and I didn't dare be 2 shades darker, or I wouldn't have matched the rest of the film.
Mm-hmm.
Ready?
That was my own sweater and my own jeans. And you'll notice the little bell-bottom flare, and they're actually back. Mm-hmm. My little gaucho hat.
Yeah, the hat's great. Was that from the costume department, or was that yours?
I think that was my hat, too.
Yeah.
I love hats. There is a fabulous hat that I wore in the movie that was not my hat. But again, do you remember what Keith's last name is, the costume designer?
That is Keith Hodges.
Keith Hodges, absolutely. Very, very talented.
I wouldn't want to lose you two.
Don't worry, you won't.
Oh,
You can definitely feel the art direction of this film, where you can tell the person who did the costumes and the sets and makeup. It's all very sort of cohesive as a look, you know, which you didn't see too often in low-budget movies at the time.
I actually did my own makeup.
Really?
In fact, I did my own makeup in everything I ever did.
Oh, really?
You know, maybe the makeup artist might argue with that, but, you know, I wanted my own look, you know, and the way that I did my makeup would be reflecting the character that I was playing. So even if I let them just, you know, put my base on, there would always be aspects of my look that I controlled.
And since this was a low-budget film, it was actually one of the earlier movies that New World made. I guess Roger had sort of broken off on his own. He'd been doing stuff with AIP for a long time. Did you get
Wasn't this called New Dimensions at this time, or did it have...
It's New World.
It was New World? Mm-hmm. Didn't he also have a company called New Dimensions?
Well, he had New Horizons.
New Horizons.
And then, yeah. And then it went through several changes. I think it's had like 4 different names since then.
Right. Yes, but this was
this is
clearly a Roger Corman production, and it was New World Pictures at the time. And Charles Rothman was the producer. Mm-hmm. But I think Roger's involvement in the very beginning was a very powerful one. And I think once he had said what he wanted and what he expected, that his instructions were, you know, followed to the letter, so that he was able to have a long-distance kind of control rather than being on the set every day.
Mm-hmm. Well, since this was sort of still a new company, did you get the sense, was everybody just sort of excited they were building something, or what was the attitude like at New World?
I wasn't involved in any of the business aspect, you know. As an actor, my job was to be there on time, know my lines, be prepared, be healthy, feel good. And, you know, the wonderful thing about being an actor, if you're not involved in the production, is that that's what is expected of you. And so there isn't a whole lot that's going to distract you from, you know, making the best product that you can under the circumstances that you're in.
Mm-hmm.
You were like someone drowning, Susan. I didn't mean to scare you.
My flashlight went dead and I couldn't see.
Juan probably left them out in the sun. You can't do that. It kills the batteries.
Yeah, but didn't you hear me calling?
It's just so funny watching the contrast between you and Sherry. You know, you're sort of so cool and commanding, you know, and poor Sherry just has to basically cry and whine for the whole movie.
No comment. No comment on the commentary. Can't say something nice about somebody, don't say anything at all. But I'm pleased that I was able to lose that 5-8 pounds of, you know, having just had a baby, and I'm looking, hey, you know, I thought I was fat at that time, and I think, oh no, I really wasn't as chunky as I thought I was. It's a great bird flying on the antenna.
Now, do you remember where this little town was where they shot this?
Well, it was all out in the high desert.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe this had been used you would know better than I, but I thought that this had been used many times as a set.
It looks like a TV set, like they would use it for westerns. Yeah, exactly.
You two go on.
Kind of important to keep the dune buggy from jumping out of the shot when you shut it down, too. Or making that racket of chug, 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 chug.
It's okay with me.
It was a good little vehicle. I'd take it today, wouldn't you?
Absolutely.
Look at those hubcaps.
You could ride one of those out to Palm Springs. It'd be great.
Oh, it'd be fabulous.
Now, after this film, of course, you stayed busy with a few more features. Before you took some time off to care for your child. What was your attitude coming off of Velvet Vampire? What kind of roles were you looking for after this?
Anything that paid the mortgage. Well, I made a mistake. I think Roger wanted me to do some other films. And I was set, well, I don't think, I know, I was set to do another film for him that was going to shoot in Costa Rica.
What's your pleasure, ma'am?
And at the same time this was offered to me, The Mechanic was offered to me. And it was a lead in Roger's movie and a featured role which was supposed to lead to a starring role in Scorpio.
What else did they do?
And I explained to them, this is United Artists, and my agents want me to do it. And since we're not even into pre-production yet, I hope you guys don't mind if I do this film instead of the Costa Rican project. The Costa Rican project, I think, was a women's prison film, and my role was to have been that of a lesbian. So I never really got to read the script for it, but I was told the part was mine, and they were working on my visas and all that sort of thing. And I think everyone was very disappointed that I opted out of that. And it seemed to end my career in Roger Corman movies, so there must have been more upset than I even knew, because I was hoping I could come back and do some more films. And as it turned out, both those films were small parts. Certainly interesting experiences, but, who's to say what... I might have been a really famous scream queen,
You could have played an evil warden,
Who knows?
So now, since you mentioned The Mechanic, do you remember working with Michael Winner since he was sort of at his peak when he made that movie?
Absolutely. Michael was a good friend. In fact, I got an email from him recently.
Yeah, he and, he did so many Charles Bronson films at the time. Do you remember what their relationship was like at the time? Were they good friends?
Very good friends. Very, very close. And even in this scene, this is interesting juxtaposition that we've got a love scene going on, intercut with a snake in a very precarious spot. And,
It's bitten you.
oh, here I come with my first aid kit.
I'll have to cut the puncture open.
Now hold on, honey, and you're going to be all right. Try to relax.
Oh, blood. My favorite breakfast. I just can't wait to suck out the blood.
The point will thread.
It was an awfully realistic knife cut there.
It was, wasn't
Good girl,
it?
honey, just relax.
I might have actually... Maybe I did cut her.
Sure looked like it. Or was it a stunt thigh, maybe?
It was a leg of lamb.
Don't worry. I'll take care of you.
You're a very lucky girl.
I think you could actually have a fun drinking game every time Sherry cries in the movie, I know you don't drink, of course, but, someone could cause some serious damage doing that.
Exactly.
Since he was a child.
Did his parents live here too?
His people died on their reservation.
And you notice my character has an answer for everything.
He was like a brother to me.
Well, she's had a lot of years of practice, Perfect alibi no matter what.
I
Right.
always rest in the hottest part of the day.
All right.
I think vampires just
Thank you, Diane.
naturally have to do that, don't they? They lead these double lives. And we met lots of them at the recent vampire convention, where we screened The Velvet Vampire before a live audience. And I met some of them up close and personal.
Now, was there ever any discussion of maybe making your character more traditionally vampiric, like giving you fangs or anything like that?
Never.
Or was that never that was never on the table?
Never. The subplot, of course, was that I had this rare blood disease that drove me to nourish myself with blood.
Mm-hmm.
And chicken liver would help from time to time, as you know, and but I would die without it.
Mm-hmm.
I liked that. I thought that was, you didn't have to suspend belief, to buy that.
Right.
And there weren't a whole lot of vampire movies being made at this time.
Right. Well, yeah, you had, of course, Hammer Films in England were making vampire films, which those were actually about the same time. They started the whole lesbian vampire thing in Britain, but that was more Gothic period films, the fangs and the corsets and everything, whereas this is, a completely different animal.
Exactly. Would those be Christopher Lee films? And
well, he wasn't in the lesbian vampire ones, although Peter Cushing did one of them.
Oh, right, right.
Christopher Lee just played Dracula, and he only played Dracula.
Well, I knew the Hammer people very well because I had gone to London to meet Sir James Carreras, who was not only the head of Hammer Films, but he was also the head of the variety chapter, the variety charities of the whole world, and they were looking for a vehicle for me to do, and I got involved in another film. I played a jungle goddess in a film called Eve for Harry Allen Towers, and Christopher Lee was my co-star, Herbert Lom, and Robert Walker Jr. I think that Velvet Vampire, I think I should have come back from the dead, and there should have been a sequel, don't you?
Yeah.
Maybe even 2 or 3.
Absolutely.
The Velvet Vampire could ride again on that dune buggy.
Diane tells me you grew up
Or a
together.
beautiful white stallion. Wouldn't that be nice?
Well, she just ages at the end, somebody could just slip her some liver, she could
Yeah.
get better.
If they'd just given me some sunscreen.
Yeah. We'll talk about that near the end of the film, because it's definitely one of the more unusual endings for a horror film.
Right.
Certainly
Well,
not what
especially
you'd expect.
since I'm out in the light here, you
Right.
know?
Sort of discreetly covered, but still the
Right.
sun's hitting you. But
Right. Such a beautiful location. The high desert is magnificent.
What are we coming here for?
You'll see. Tell me, could you live in the desert?
Not me. I don't know how you can. Have you always?
Always.
What a waste.
Not too big of a stretch, because I was born and raised in California. I'm
That's
a
right.
California girl.
you are a native Angelina.
I am.
Why hang around?
Lived in New York for a couple of years, but
My husband's
moved on
buried
back.
here.
What is it about California that keeps pulling you back?
It's home. I love London and Paris, and I love Italy and speak a little Italian. Really love traveling in Europe. Wish I were rich enough to have several homes. And winter here and summer in Saint-Tropez.
About a week after we were
And
married.
spend a lot of time in London.
You ever
Would
thought
be
about
great.
moving the body?
I can't. You see, when he died, I had the...
Now, the film only makes a few quick references to your husband, who, of course, we see you sleeping, in his grave later on. Did you have any kind of backstory in your head for what went on there? What was the story with her and her husband?
Well, I did, and I insisted. I became very, very close friends with one of the assistant camera operators who also drove my dressing room truck and was kind of assigned to taking care of me, a fellow named Lee Lubig. He and I were very, very dear friends, and I kept stressing about who were they going to put in that coffin that I was going to have to lay on top of in the nude. And finally I pulled a little bit of temperament and I said, you've got to put Lee in that grave. You've got to give him one more hat to wear, and that is dress him up in that suit. And because I've got to be on top of a friend. So they obliged and he obliged, and that made it a lot more comfortable for me than having, some perfect stranger come to the set. And again, like I said, Stephanie and Charles were always very, very sensitive and very kind to me. And that, made for a very nice working relationship. So the person in the coffin playing my husband was, oh my gosh, I think he did grip work besides driving me and a camera operator. So now he got an actual role, you know. But as far as the backstory, again, I just created the story of my rare blood disease and what that would mean to virtually outlive the people that you loved. Because where are you going to find someone to marry and to fall in love with and marry that has your same blood disease? But, you know, it's a story of survival, isn't it? Of what will we do to survive? You know, would we actually kill our own husband for his blood in order to survive? Would, you know, so it makes one think of some of the great artists in history, like Jericho, who painted that amazing painting called The Raft, where there was cannibalism aboard, you know, the survivors of that shipwreck. It's the stories of how far human beings can be pushed in order to survive. You know, at what point will you sacrifice yourself or not sacrifice yourself? What is the greater good? So in this case, I justified my own importance of sacrificing my husband for my own life. And have these periodic rendezvous with him in his coffin. But we're not there yet.
Right, not yet. Well, I think it's that desperation and regret that make, you know, the character so interesting. And I mean, I think in the last scene, I always feel really sorry for her, you know, just on the ground being, you know, persecuted with the crosses. I mean, you actually really feel bad for Diane.
Thank you. I did my job, and I'll have a story for you when we get there.
Okay.
Wait till I tell you that one.
It's also interesting that you can, you know, in these scenes at night in the bedroom, all you're really doing is just sitting in a chair, but you make it so arresting. You know, it's just I guess the way your eyes and your makeup and everything, it's so hypnotic, even though you're really not doing anything at all.
And it looks like a chinchilla bed throw, too. And those were the days before faux fur, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
It was a very beautiful home where we shot. And the people who owned the home were very, very gracious to the leading actors, allowing us access. And I think perhaps a lot of their bits and pieces were used in the film.
We'll cut out here. Are you getting audio from the movie? Are you getting the movie audio?
No.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Well, yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
there it goes. There it goes.
Well, needless to say, any of the nudity was really scary for me because, remember, I just had stopped breastfeeding my daughter. So, you know. The necklace is interesting, too. Keith created this necklace, which actually was a bloodstone. So many of the things that Keith Hodges came up with were really quite artistically selected, you know. I think the idea of having red in the desert was a beautiful choice. And the dress is so much a part of what makes the dream sequence, the brass headboard.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Susie?
And the naked bodies. Flesh tone against the sand.
Well, that whole like crimson and gold idea runs so much through the movie. It's even in the opening credits, you know, and it's carried so much throughout the whole film. It's really nicely handled. Yes,
a nice image sequence.
Now there's an outfit.
Well, that was really one beautiful peignoir, kind of a peachy pink, trimmed in marabou feathers. And here I am with my raw chicken, a beautiful roaster. I wonder if we had it for dinner that night. And I love to tell this story because this was such an interesting phenomena that here I am with a raw chicken, and I taste raw chicken liver for the first time in my life. And then in the later years, over the last 19 years, I get involved with holistic cat care for dogs and cats, raise 11 generations of Tonkinese cats, and feed them raw meat. So my introduction to the raw meat and the eating of it, aside from our steak tartare and some episodes with sushi.
Liver, that's raw liver.
So
There you
that
go.
line it foreshadowed 19 years of my life. Ever notice that people feed their cats raw liver? Well, oddly enough, my very first little kitty cat that I adopted when I was 9 years old, my mom and I would walk to the market every day and we would buy her fresh liver. So I raised my first cat on liver and conducted all of this research regarding raw meat and raw bones for dogs and cats, and ultimately wrote 4 holistic dog and cat care books. So isn't it interesting what you take away from films that, adds to your life? And I do remember that eating the raw liver was not half bad, especially if you swallow it whole.
And it's good for you.
That's the way the cats do it, too. Cats don't chew. They swallow it whole. They just shred, tear, and bone crush.
And apparently it's a good aphrodisiac.
Apparently so. Now, this is the scene where Stephanie and Charles did close the set. You can see right where his hand passed by on my thigh. I have an enormous bruise that's covered up with makeup from something that happened out in the desert. And if I may be so bold, Michael and I both kept our robes on while they cleared the set and through the rehearsals. And we get to the final moment that we're going to shoot, and Michael takes his robe off, and I'll be darned if he hasn't covered his frontal private parts with masking tape.
Ow.
Masking tape. Indeed, because I was expected to be totally nude, no masking tape, but now Michael was very sensitive to having a female director. So he wanted his private parts covered. Now, boys being boys, their private parts do have a tendency to move. Rip. Off came the masking tape, and masking tape, when it's near hair, could cause an ouch or two. So if you don't think this was not difficult to keep a straight face and try to be involved with the poetry of this moment, when your leading man has his genitalia covered with large pieces of gaffer's tape and body makeup over it, I think that shows you just what good an actress I was, right?
Very good.
And I didn't even get to keep that beautiful negligee. But here I am in yet another outfit.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
So did he also wear the masking tape in the desert scene?
We have to leave this afternoon.
You know, I don't think so.
Amos called earlier.
In the desert scene, he may have.
Since today's Sunday.
That's a good question.
Well, I guess he wasn't lying on anyone. He wasn't as shy.
Well,
so.
you know what? Maybe we filmed this sequence. See, we'd have to actually look at the old
log.
call sheets,
Right.
because if we filmed this sequence, I could have sworn that this was my first exposure to masking tape. But he might have taken that out into the desert with him also.
Good. I get to have you two for another night.
Didn't know he was quite so modest, did you?
No.
Now, because I have to leave for a while.
Of course, now, a lot of actors and actresses will use, colored tape to make sure the directors can't use it if anything shows. They'll wear, lime or pink or something, so if anything slips through, then they have to cut it out.
I didn't know that. What a good idea.
Yeah.
He had body makeup over his tape.
Sure. How can I put you down for something?
And her character is arcing here, where she's really playing Kitty by the door. And that looks like a heck of a meal Juan is preparing.
So now, where are those red boots now? Because they are great.
Oh, those red boots. Anything red would really be quite cool for me.
It's just funny now watching it. I mean, that look is exactly what's in fashion. If you go out to clubs in Silver Lake or wherever, it's exactly what they're wearing. Those kind of boots
Absolutely.
and the hats and everything.
Absolutely. Mini skirts with the boots and skirts over them, and there's our homage to Les Fanous.
No fun.
And there's the birth date.
Yeah.
1850 to 1875, and I'm still around in 1971.
Susie, I'm right here, so don't play like I'm not.
Now, some of you may have also noticed earlier on the art dealer who just appears at the beginning and the end,
Right.
Carl. His last name is actually Stoker, which is the name of the author of Dracula.
Of course,
So,
Bram Stoker.
I assume Stephanie was just having some fun with vampire lore here.
Absolutely. Wasn't it called the Stoker Gallery?
Yeah.
That's brilliant. Brilliant.
You sure know how to get to me.
You're goddamn right I do. Come on.
He has a very beautiful daughter.
Yeah, it's very sad that Michael passed away just a few years ago.
Very sad. He was a brilliant writer also.
Yes.
Captain Blood. And had a big writing career going.
Yeah, no, we're not quite sure where Sherry is now, but
No, I have
knows?
no idea.
Get out of here.
oh well. Maybe she'll buy this DVD and
And
take
reappear.
take a stroll down memory lane. And
Absolutely.
Why did you kill your husband?
And it'd be fun to try to
Then why did you marry
remember.
him?
He may have actually been on my episode of Star Trek. He may have been on the Apple,
Can't leave you.
because I know that he and I had worked together before.
Jerry Daniels.
Jerry Daniels, of course.
Yeah.
You need nourishment.
I need more and more now. Something
Well, I'm
is
100 years old. I would think something would be speeding up inside me. I know just how she feels.
Bring one of my people.
You could almost see this as sort of like an analogy now that plastic surgery and implants have sort of taken over. It's almost like this is a sort of a parable about that. You have
Right.
to keep getting more and more and more and more to stay young.
Right. Now, I have not succumbed to that as of yet. I have no desire for Botox or fillers or...
Well, luckily there's kind of a backlash against that now. You see there are a lot of casting calls for people who are all natural with no implants and no face work, and it's actually sort of circling back around. So I'm sure all those actresses now are just like, why did I do that?
Sure. Poor Juan.
Mm-hmm.
He was one of my better housemen, too.
This is the fourth one that died in the
It is interesting that there's actually very, very little on-screen violence in this film. I mean, there's almost none. Basically, the worst is you see people, you crouch over people, and that's pretty much it.
Well, I wonder where that came from. That was a Hitchcock favorite.
Yeah.
Let the audience know
Yeah.
to be afraid. Well,
Lee, let's go somewhere else.
Oh, don't be afraid. Everybody here is dead. Susie, come and look at this.
pretty darn good, too.
Maybe it was some kind of animal.
No animal kills like that.
Did you see anyone around? No.
Diane, there's one thing I don't get. The headstone said your husband died
Cover
in
story.
1875.
Must have been a typo.
No.
The stonecutter.
His hand slipped.
His hand slipped.
You see, that was originally the grave of Victor's great-grandfather. Now, he's the one that died in 1875.
But no, it is interesting. I mean, especially in the early 70s, horror films generally were getting much, much bloodier because the MPA had really come into effect and you could get an R rating. So the temptation was to start, this was the same year as movies like Straw Dogs and Clockwork Orange. I mean, blood was just flying everywhere.
Right.
Whereas this film kind of goes the opposite way. You see a little bit of blood on the neck wounds and that, but it's really restrained, So it's almost surprising the way that Roger would want a horror film that's so very, very restrained.
It was quite elegant. And that's the way Stephanie wrote it.
Yeah.
And I'm very grateful for that because I think perhaps that's one of the reasons that it's holding up so well.
Yeah.
Might even be a member of his own tribe. They can be very...
And my character just had an explanation for everything. Quite brilliant.
She's like a cat, always lands on her feet.
That's right. That's right. That's me.
What the hell are we waiting for? I'm going to call the police.
Beautiful home.
That's my responsibility, Lee.
So was any of this set dressing, or was this a real house?
It's a real house.
The decor and everything was really there?
As I recall, it was.
Bugging you?
There might have been a few bits and pieces moved around, but
What's the stuff about dry air in the grave?
it was quite a spot, quite a beautiful spot.
made her husband into a mummy, and that the desert air...
Well, that is how they preserved the early mummies. I mean...
a lot of shit.
Well, I think her feeling for Juan...
So now, where were the scenes behind the mirror? Do you know where those were shot? Was that in the house? Did they mock something up, or...?
No, that was in the house with
First night we met,
the frame of the mirror.
Mm-hmm.
and then last night.
You ate
Yum.
raw meat yesterday.
So was it just like a small room? Did they just put the curtain behind it, or how did they rig that?
It was actually part of this house.
Really?
And that was done with just a little bit of red lipstick inside my lower lid. And this was very embarrassing for me when I just went to this Velvet Vampire screening, and I'm sitting there, and this whole audience is seeing my bare breasts. And I've never had that experience before. So I wanted to kind of shrink. I wanted to slide down, you know. But everyone was
Well, you know,
quite nice.
everyone's nice about it, and you definitely got the. It's probably the classiest nude scenes ever in a Corman film. So.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank heavens. But I think it's actually prettier wearing the dress.
Yeah. If you'd done a women in prison film, I don't think it would have come off quite the same way.
Right, that's right. Maybe Michael Winters saved me from that.
Yeah, from long shower scenes.
Right, right. With other women.
Right.
I did a long shower scene in an Ivory soap commercial once.
Yeah, you can see Michael's briefs there for a
There
second.
you can. Absolutely.
You sure do cut her up a lot in this movie.
I know. I think I was trying to spell something, like an upside-down V for velvet. But that's just about one of the most beautiful names for a vampire movie, the Velvet Vampire.
Mm-hmm.
You'd almost think that it could have, run away onto coffee mugs, and that there'd be a whole Velvet Vampire mystique.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there will be.
I'm actually surprised like a rock band hasn't taken that name. You think it'd be perfect.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. Well, there's a lot of great memorabilia that I collected from the film, the poster and lobby cards and...
There's nothing.
Even that's an
Anyway,
interesting
this
idea
one's my
because
dream.
there's so many new forms of sciences that are coming out. Dan Brown has made noetic science quite famous, and epigenetics, and where to have two people dream the same dream is quite prophetic.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think Stephanie really tried to get some wonderful elements.
Yeah.
And here is my dear friend allowing me to rest in my birthday suit and just being the wonderful gentleman that he was.
Now it's interesting that the juxtaposition of those two scenes where you're sleeping with him, it's just sort of like it's a different kind of symbiosis versus the dream sharing, but you're both having it at the same time. It's a really nice little parallel action here.
This is Lee Ritter. You've got my car.
Yep.
Is it ready?
And of course, sleep studies have shown that people who do sleep in the same bed for long periods of time, they do have the same sleep patterns, and their
What part?
thought patterns tend to
The part
become the same.
Absolutely. Dream the same dreams.
Yeah.
Well, then what are you waiting for?
Of course, poor Diane is, sleeping with death. So what does that mean?
I know.
What
I
lady?
know. She has a really good imagination, highly evolved imaginative spirit.
Yeah, you can have it tomorrow.
I need it today.
Now, how did you think she felt about her husband? Did she miss him? Was she feeling regret? What was going through her mind, do you think?
Well, the image that I had for myself was a time in all eternity type marriage, and that they were soulmates and, bonded through eternity. And that although she had to do specific things in order to endure, and that's a beautiful shot of the house and the pool, the back of the house. My character, the action that I chose for my character was the love of my life. and
Lee's nice.
would hopefully
But
reunite
he's not very
on the other
observant,
side.
is
Right.
he? Susan,
Just much, much, much later.
have you ever
Just
noticed
much, much, much later. Well, there is no
And the
time
account,
in
pleasure
space.
we have.
We go into the world of quantum physics now, right?
Right.
we can't help it.
Now, that was my own outfit
It's our
also.
nature, the way we are. And in their secret
you're one
house,
chic
they
vampire.
hate us.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, don't you think I'm chic today, too?
Absolutely.
Fishing,
you're
fishing
chic.
for compliments.
You're chic in all of your roles.
I don't know how chic I was as a jungle goddess,
Well,
but,
maybe not that.
but I tried.
Yeah.
I had glorious eye makeup.
Get your things packed.
And the bikini that I wore
We're getting
in
out of here.
Eve had been originally made for Raquel
She
Welch.
said she called and took care of everything?
I still have
She
that
took care of
bikini.
nothing. She's trying to
Speaking
keep
of
us
jungles, I
here
should just
like
mention briefly that you've completed an interview for a film that's going to be coming out and may already be out by the time this is released, called Machete Maidens, which is an overview of all the Filipino and American co-productions that were made during the 60s and 70s. And of course, you were in Beast of Blood, which is one of the most famous Eddie Romero films from the time. So keep an eye out for that. Is anything in particular you'd like to share about your other horror film?
Well, The Beast of Blood was really kind of like the bookend to this one because, like I had mentioned, I was a couple of months pregnant when I went to the Philippines to do that film. And that was a very dicey experience, in your first trimester of pregnancy.
Right.
And they didn't know, because I had only found out the day before I got on the plane. So they had to be, somewhat cautious of what they had me do. But, I love the Filipino people. I always will love the Filipino people. And even though the conditions that we filmed under were really rough, it's also a great experience. And now we see that beautiful desert bed is actually my bed with a beautiful white fur spread. And, I didn't realize it, but I sleep in red sheets today. And just over the last year or so, I bought several sheet sets in a red. And, I wonder where I got that idea. Now I see.
I need like a red satin nightgown to go with it.
Maybe. Can we find Keith Hodges to design something for me? My red is just a little bit more pomegranate. It's got a little more blue in it. But I love red. And I didn't always. It wasn't always my favorite color. But I've just grown to be quite passionate about red.
I was hungry for you.
Sort of a delayed reaction to this film, maybe.
Maybe. like the liver.
Mm-hmm.
You don't.
No. No,
Lee. Do
You're
you
so
know who's on
manipulative.
spare?
Anything for a tasty little meal, right?
your husband.
Yes.
Now, this was a very interesting
Only
scene
him.
also.
You see, I'm really very old. Do you care?
I'm seducing him for his blood,
No.
but in my heart I'm being faithful
Me too.
to my husband.
Mm-hmm.
So this is purely seduction for survival purposes. And there's the famous line, I'm really very old, do you care?
Now, do you think she had any sort of romantic interest in Sherry's character, or was that just for food as well? It's a little ambiguous.
No, just for food. I was an equal opportunity vampire. No sexual preference. Now, what's interesting here is as I bit on his neck, let's watch his right hand for a moment, his right arm, and see if it was actually on film. Because what actually happened on one of the takes was as I tried to help him get that reaction, he put his hand on my spinal column and he dug in. And the more he dug in, the more I bit down until we were really both in excruciating pain. Never were the words cut, print more needed than in that particular moment.
Wow.
So his method acting was a little bit painful for me. I did not draw blood.
Good thing you didn't have any slapping scenes in that movie.
Oh, my goodness.
It's interesting they didn't decide they decided not to use that take. It would have changed that scene a little bit.
Exactly. Well, I think I would have broken character because of the pain.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what happened.
Yeah.
And I had a nasty bruise on my back. You know, you always end up in a film with a lot of bruises, you know? Now that actually is in that house. And
So what was that actually used for, do you remember? Or aside from voyeurism, obviously.
it might have been a closet. Oh, no, well, I don't think this is actually what's on the other side of that curtain. I think this was created somewhere else. But I do remember sitting in that beautiful chair, pretending to be looking at this scene, of course. Sound effects.
Did you or Sherry ever get injured at all doing all the running? But pretty much from this point on, it's almost nonstop, a marathon between the two of you. Was that difficult at all, shooting that?
Yeah, it was tough, you know, apart from the bruises and little sensitivity to the sun. And
That's sand.
Close the door, Susan.
Your story's starting to wear thin here.
Very thin. I've been so convincing up till now. I've done my best.
Don't you know?
No.
Some great lines. I'm going to have to remember them.
You did the same thing the other night.
Maybe they might still work today.
Maybe.
It was an accident.
You could have turned away, but you didn't.
I saw water.
Now, were you still married at the time you made this film, or had you already gotten divorced?
No. When my daughter was born, my husband had been my theatrical manager, and she was born at the end of the marriage after about 4.5 years of being married. My daughter was born, and we separated right after she was born, so I was a single mom from the get-go.
Did you have a boyfriend or anything at the time who came on the set at all?
No. Mm-mm.
I knew I wanted you.
It's probably better.
Absolutely.
I was hungry.
Nobody to get jealous.
Now, Michael had a girlfriend at the time who I believe later became his wife. And she did come in and visit with him.
Yes.
No, as we know, if she could handle Beyond the Valley of Dolls, she could probably handle anything.
Right.
Susan.
That's pretty racy for 1971. It's also very racy for me.
Yeah.
See him put his hands
Almost.
out. It was a good fall he took.
Until they cut away just right the last second.
Now I have a black and white still of this with the trick knife through my hand. I remember that quite well. Now we know why she had tennis shoes on through all the interior
So
shots.
convenient she had those on.
Exactly.
And of course, Diane can just sort of, follow her, like, quietly.
Right.
You don't have to do any running.
Now that was convenient too, wasn't it?
Traveling light.
I forgot my coat.
I got something. Back, if you want. Didn't even thank me for stopping.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Where are you running from?
No place?
Now, he's very well cast, don't you think?
Mm-hmm.
Don't have much to say, do you? How am I supposed to know where you want to go?
Wherever I can get a ride
It's actually amazing how much weight the three of you had to carry, since, I mean, the cast in this movie is so tiny. It's almost a three-person drama, you know?
Exactly. And if everybody died, it would have been a tragedy.
How did it feel taking on a lead role? I mean, this was sort of your first big theatrical lead role, and you've done big parts on TV, but you know, Beast of Blood was sort of an upper tier lead role.
Beast of Blood came first,
Yeah.
and I must say I quite enjoyed it.
And of course, in this film, I mean, you're really in the spotlight. I mean, it's all about you, and you're even in the title, so you know.
Right. It's a nice place to be. And there's my wonderful hat. And this is quite a divine outfit, too. A cape. The bandaged hand. There was another hat that we didn't use that was spectacular.
Well, the hat you did use is pretty great. So.
I have a still of me in the other hat. But I would have thought Keith would have had his own label after this shoot. Now, this is the Greyhound bus station in downtown Los Angeles.
Yeah, now, how did they get to shoot here?
I have no idea. I think they showed up with handheld cameras, Steadicams, and away we went, because those were not extras. Those were real bus passengers. And
That was a real cop.
could very well have been. I mean, I just remember saying, excuse me. You know, they might have set them up for a moment before I came flying down the escalator. So this might have been one of those great, memorable movie moments of catch us if you can. But I don't know.
Yeah.
I really don't know. I had too much on my plate to worry about it.
Again, it's such a great but simple effect, you know, just sort of gliding down the escalator. Just the way it's pulled off is really beautiful.
A little bit of Hitchcock. One of the things that was paramount in my mind as an actress was that less is more. And
Yeah, it's like you're not trying to be scary or evil. You look just sort of sad and forlorn, you know, which I think works so much better. It makes it much more haunting.
exactly, because you really, as an actor, you can't play an emotion. You either have to have it or you don't. Play scared, you know, play dead. No.
Yeah.
Sounds crazy, but she's a vampire, and she murdered Lee.
Susie, tell me what this is all about.
Look, don't question me. Help me.
All right. Come on over.
I can't. She's still around someplace, and she'll kill me, too.
Where are you?
In the bus station.
Be there in a few minutes.
Do you remember if the ending with Carl, was that actually in the script, or was that something added?
I believe that was in the script.
Is that nice sort of little Twilight Zone sting at the end, you know?
Right. A good twist. Now, as I recall, I did hurt my hand here.
I can see how. I don't think your shoes looked as comfortable as hers. You had some heels to run on, it looks
Yeah,
like.
I did. I think aren't I wearing? I'm wearing the knee-high boots.
Let's see. Yeah. See, I'm sure he's got a little white running shoes. So.
And this outdoor sequence was filmed on Olivera Street. So, you know...
Just real crowd.
A real crowd. A real crowd. Enter the classic symbolism.
Mm-hmm. Now, I assume that we're meant to think that it's all the crosses that actually kill her, not the sunlight. Is that correct?
I think we leave a certain amount of that to your imagination.
Mm-hmm.
One might also think that she's ready to die. Mm-hmm. You know, that she's had enough of this lifestyle and is ready to reunite with the dead husband.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, again, at what point do you give up the ghost?
Right.
You can see that I've just about had it at this point. You know, I've had enough.
It's just time to finally wind down.
I really wasn't a bad person. I was a victim of circumstance.
Help me take off her
Now,
cape.
what had happened here was I had been fitted for swimmer's contact lenses called scleral lenses because they wanted my eyes to turn completely red at the end, and they flipped me into a white wig. And so right as I hit the ground, they bring in the eye doctor to put on me for the first time these blood red lenses that cover the entire orb of your eye. And I remember that I was a wreck about doing this because I didn't wear contacts at the time. And so the cinematographer, as he gets me where he wants me, which is now, they call cut, and in comes the eye doctor to put those lenses in my eyes. And let's see if we can catch it for a minute. If we can actually see the red lens, because I remember the director saying, "Open your eyes, Celeste, open your eyes." And I went, "My eyes are open." And that was about as far as I could open my eyes with the red lenses because it was so painful. But I think you got a glimpse of it.
It's a really nice dissolve there.
Very nice dissolve. And I was like blonde again for a minute.
You were platinum blonde.
Very, very Jean Harlow
Oh,
blonde.
a couple of hours.
And a putty tat.
Almost. Again, cat foreshadowing.
Yes, yes. My 19
Some of our other
generations of
victims,
Celeste cats.
Don't they want to question
Tonkinese.
Tomorrow's soon enough.
And again, the artwork foreshadowing my new career with
How well did you know Diane?
NazimArtist.com as my
Pretty well.
She wasn't
major
just a
client.
customer.
Yeah, she's just a customer.
Nice kitty.
But she told me you.
And this is a beautiful location also.
She had a rare blood disease.
So now as we wind down and Susan meets her fate here, what's it like watching the film again after all these years? How do you feel about it?
I think we should have done a sequel. There should have been a slow dissolve back with my hair going from white to dark,
Why did she
slinking through the bus station.
kill me? Fear of crosses in the sun.
Roger, where was your thinking?
Guess she freaked out.
Well, the film certainly did well enough. I mean, it actually got reissued, several times as, on drive-in double features and that kind of thing for several years. So, and it had a nice long life on home video too until maybe the last decade or so it's been out of commission. But thankfully, we'll have it again at last. So, film just keeps coming up again over and over and over.
Well, that's music to my ears. I'm very happy about that. I hope everyone enjoys it because it was quite fun to be a
Life is
part
just
of.
like Diane's.
Yes,
How often in life do you really get to be a vampire?
collector's items.
At least in my own mind.
Right.
She cut me with it. Oh!